In 1965, I was 20 years old, and that's a very vulnerable age for a car guy. Things get imprinted in your brain, and what got imprinted in my brain in 1965 was the cars from Shelby American. My name is Bob Garland, and I have a 1966 Shelby GT-350. I got this car in 1988. I actually been fortunate to own two Shelbys. This is my second one. I originally had a 1966 Hertz GT-350. I had a good time with that one for 5 years, and then sold that to get this one. In the mid-60s, Ford was interested in having a car that would compete with the Corvettes at the time, and Ford really had nothing. And coincidentally, Carroll Shelby was developing Cobra, and he and Ford Motor Company joined forces to create the Shelby GT-350 Mustang. This car is an authentic Shelby that has been verified by the Shelby American Club, but there have been a number of modifications made to it. So it's been set up like you would have raced a Shelby back in 1966. The modifications are period correct for the car, such things as the wheels, the front end, instrument panel, the engine, transmission, rear end, lots of things changed on the car. It has 4 Weber 2-barrel carburetors on it, and so each of the barrels essentially sits on top of a cylinder head and feeds a lot of gas in a very short period of time to the tune of about 13 miles to the gallon, but increases the performance of the car. I've never had this car dynoed. A stock Shelby GT-350 with a 4-barrel and regular Shelby cam and all that was rated a little over 300 horsepower. It would be my guess that this car is between 350 and 400 horsepower. 350 to 400 horsepower, of course, was a lot for a car back then. Even by today's standards, that's a lot of horsepower. But back then, that was a whole lot of horsepower, particularly out of 289 cubic inches.
My name is Sam Thomas, and I drive a 2017 Shelby GT350. I use the car, it'll be like a weekend getaway, take my kids out, take for a spin, look for some really curvy roads. I do want to get into some tracking, it's just a matter of time. As far as horsepower, 526 horsepower at the crank, and it redlines at 8250. It really picks up, the torque kicks in about 3,800, and I could be wrong. Around there, and that's when it starts, the engine wakes up between 3,800 and 8,250. The sound of it, it's not like a normal 5.0 or even the LS motor or any of those other motors out there, or even to a flat 6 motor. The motor is just so unique. This is not a 0 to 60 car by any means. It is more, let's go around the curve as fast as you can. That's what this car offers. This thing's what, 3,700 pounds, you know, give a less 10 or 15 here and there. You don't notice it when you're pushing it at all, you know, so it handles the weight very well.
Today I've been given the opportunity to actually drive a new GT350. I've not driven a new GT350, but part of the reason is I'm afraid. And people would say, well, why are you afraid? And I would say, I'm afraid I would enjoy it so much I'd have to buy one.
Now, I do recommend if you press the mode button right here, you see the up and down, press up one. Sport. Now your valves are open. Now your suspension, you see the one right and left of it?
Leave it a second.
Don't shift. No, press throttle up.
I want to shift.
Throttle up.
I don't like to drive. I don't like to drive in this.
You just hit the power band, so.
Oh, really? You can drive this car all day long. my car after 6 hours becomes a chore. This car would never be a chore. I could drive it cross country in 3 days, no problem.
Fun factor hits at about 8,000. That's when you're...
8,000?
Yeah.
Never would take my car that high, and I'm sure it would come apart. The thing that you've got to remember, there are young people today who would give their eye teeth to have this car, who care nothing about that car, the 66 car, but would love to have this car. And when they are 50 and 60 years old and they have a little bit of spendable income, they will be out looking for these cars to try to recapture their youth. I'm done. Thanks, Sam. Delightful.
Indeed, very excited.
Never driven this car before, right?
Never driven this car before, very first time.
Have you ever driven like a classic car before?
57 Chevy Bel Air, that's the only classic car I've ever driven. Cool. So this is a big deal. All right, we're in motion. A lot of vibrations. However, it's definitely, got the kickbacks, that sounds good. Yeah, the pops are really nice. There's a smell to it too. It's, you know, the car's running a little rich, gasoline coming out of the exhaust, but it gives it a good experience. There's definitely a sense of occasion driving it. That's a long shifter. Where's the short shifter on this thing? Oh yeah, sounds great. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. My takeaway is, as human beings, we evolve and make ourselves better, right? However, there's a lot of history and legacy with this car and what it has to offer. It's very impressive what it had to offer in '66, but you really appreciate what technology's evolved into these days. You know, you really appreciate it.
Any new GT-350 would run circles around this car. People say, oh, they don't make them like they used to, and that's true. And I'd say, thank goodness they don't make them like they used to.
There's something about cars that we as car people are very attracted to. Is it the speed? Is it the culture? Is it the network? Is it the ability to talk about it with individuals? Or is it just a sheer experience of like that throttle revving up and that sound, the exhaust after run? Or is it go around that curve? You know, there's a saying, always respect your elders, right? It's a legacy that it's kind of established itself. It's where it all started.
I own cars because I love them. And so the value to me is very secondary. If someone came up today and offered me $100,000, the answer is no, because the car means more to me than the money.